And welcome to the inaugural session of the Talks program for the 10th edition of Serendipity Arts Festival, South Asia's premier multidisciplinary cultural platform. Over the past decade, we have found a home in Panjim, a city that has embraced this festival and all the conversations, collaborations, and creative experiments it brings with it. We begin this year's talk program with a session that feels particularly special: visual storytelling in Goa in the footsteps of Mario Miranda. Today, we celebrate the legacy of one of Goa's most beloved illustrators, a chronicler of Goan life. He captured the rhythms of villages, the quirks of towns, the musicality of the everyday, and the warmth, wit, and the contradictions that have shaped the Goan identity. Avid Learning, one of India's leading arts and cultural programming platforms, has brought this session together. We are delighted to collaborate with them once again, especially considering one of our earliest launch programs took place with Avid Learning and Asad Lalji at the Royal Opera House in Mumbai in 2017. Today's conversation brings together a remarkable panel: Deepthi Meg, comic artist, illustrator, and animator; Sanket Lavande, caricaturist; Vivek Menezes, writer, curator, and the co-founder of the Goa Arts Festival; Gerard Acuna, architect and founder of Architecture Autonomous; and our moderator, Amrita Patil, graphic novelist and writer. Together, they will explore the evolving landscape of vocabulary that roots Goan illustrators within a broader Indian context. As we open the 10th edition of the festival, we are reminded that Serendipity Arts Festival is, at its heart, a cultural experiment, one that invites new ways of seeing and being. And so it feels specially fitting to begin the Talks program with a session that honors a Goan legend while looking ahead to new vocabulary, new voices, and new ways of telling our stories. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Can you hear me? Perfect. May I invite the rest of the panelists to join me on stage? I mean, you've already received a bit of an introduction. Actually, maybe Gerard could be here, Vivek could be there, Deepthi, you could sit where Vivek is. Actually, it's all right. We have two mics, we just have to keep the flow going. Do sit. Yeah. Thank you so much. Welcome, all of you. This particular panel is extra close to home. It's something that I would accept just out of pure affection and love for the person about whom this panel originally is. To give you a little bit of an intro to my own self, so that we get that out of the way, is that I am a graphic novelist. I write and I paint. And this was working just fine a little while ago. So I have grown up in Goa from age 7 onward. So I'm about as Goan as one can be without being born here entirely. And I did the whole route. I was at Goa College of Art, basically the college that is seldom referred to on one's CVs. There onward began a long journey with experimenting with text and with visuals. That is going to be a bit hard. Can you fix this? Because there's just a lot of images to go next with. Yeah. So essentially, writing and art have both held equal emphasis and importance in my life. And trying to figure out how to use these two together has been very important. Along the way, I have done various things, ended up doing 4 graphic novels, and returned to Goa in 2019 after some years away. So, therefore, why I'm here and taking this forward. It's kind of, how is it going with the presentation there? Fantastic. Okay. Something interesting about this whole session is that the last time that I met Mario was, in fact, pretty much in the same premises, and it was for the launch of the book that was done by Gerard and at that point, was it known as the Mario Gallery already, when you did the Mario de Miranda book? It was not. No, it's not receptive. It's not moving based on my... Come on, guys. I'm just going to go and stand near the laptop. That may be better. Yeah? Yeah. This is... No, laptop can't come here. No, this is going to disrupt our flow too much. I'm just going to go there. All right. All right. Okay. So this particular book was being launched not very far from here, a couple of steps away from here, and that's essentially where I met Gerard and there was Vivek, and I got my copy of this fantastic book signed. If any of you, just to get a show of hands, how many people here are intimately acquainted with the worlds of Mario? Wow, okay, so we are speaking to the choir pretty much. All right. I'm just going to go there. Sorry about that. No, don't. You've seen my face. That doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. I'll stand. Thank you. Can you put it somewhere stable, please? Apologies for this slightly sluggish start, but here we go. So one part of my youth was spent in Bombay, and it's something that appears in my graphic novel, Kari. It's essentially a lot of time spent at Cafe Mondegar. And when I was there for the first time away from Goa after my art school, the presence of Mario on those walls there's something reassuring about it, a sense of having come home in some sense. We spent a large part of our illustration development years at Goa College of Art ripping off Mario's styles in various ways. But what really spoke to me then was the copy of this particular book that my parents had in their collection. So the way I see it, there are 2 Marios. There is the Mario of the bumptious, wonderful joie de vivre quality, and there is the awestruck and admiring Mario that did these very, very delicate, very, very evocative kind of works. And the part of me that was giddy and young responded to the joie de vivre Mario, and the part of me that felt proud to be off here was stuff that came out of this body of work. You have to remember that Goa in those years was a little bit different. So while we were acutely aware of being part of an idyllic background, the sense of lineage or the sense of being proud to be an artist from Goa was still something we were seeking a lineage about. We didn't necessarily have it as a given. This is the Mario that is the most instantly recognizable. For those that are familiar with the work, there are lots of representations of market tintos, there are the carnival scenes, there is the music teacher that is rapping the head of students that are not getting it right. And somewhere along the way, we find that Mario created almost unintentionally a Goan identity. I don't know that he set out to do that. But that is what happened. And peculiarly enough for artists, it almost never happens. He seemed to have acquired the love of the most bureaucratic of things, which is to say Goa government, which is to say, Bal Bharati textbooks. And at the same time, he's on the cover of highly left-leaning anti-establishment things like the fish curry rice anthology. He's there in various places and ways, in a way that is unequivocal in its acceptance, and something that I hope to discuss the way he was co-opted and loved by very, very diverse forms of institutions. Now, coming to the people on this panel, Gerard, apart from a flourishing and well admired career as an architect, one of the things he has done, which is priceless, has been with a certain amount of anchoring down and pride with Goan. The relationship with an artist like Mario, essentially creating digital archives of several thousands of his work, creating a series of Mario galleries where merchandise that features Mario's work is on sale. And in a way, it is kind of a piece of Mario for everyone that he has ensured. The lovely part about this panel is that we come from very different backgrounds and schools of thought, even vis-a-vis how artists should be remembered, how they should be celebrated. And I hope some of those conversations are very much part of this afternoon. May I request Gerard to take one of the moving mics which are over there and talk to us about this particular effort, because as a practicing artist, we all know that it is a very vulnerable space to make one's living off one's art. And while Mario was thriving and beloved in his heyday, there was a very imperative role played by the Mario Gallery in terms of ensuring regular income for the family in the years of his, in the latter years of his life. Handing over to Gerard to tell us a little bit about.
Around 2000, I was releasing a book on houses of Goa. Everyone can hear me clearly? Yeah. So Mario, I had asked Mario to release the book, and then Mario looked at the book. It was very well produced, and he said, "Do a book on me." So I said, "Sure, I'd love to do a book on you." And next 5 years went by, and Mario would never. He'd say, I'm not good enough for a book. And it went on like this. And suddenly, around 2005, Habiba called me and said, "Do the book on him," and got Mario to start. So I did the book on him. It was very successful. It's the yellow book. I think she showed a picture. It's called Mario the Miranda. And strangely enough, it's at this point when Mario got Parkinson's disease. And he couldn't draw. He could draw, but he couldn't draw that well. And he lost his job, and with the economic times. And I was caught and said, "You've got to now earn the income to support this family." So I said, "I've done my job. I did the book. I paid you for it. I have a different profession." So somehow I felt a lot of empathy to Mario in particular, and Habiba too. And so I said, "Okay, I'll take it up." And I didn't know anything else. I knew architecture, and I knew how to produce books. So I started making books, which nobody bought, but because people don't buy books, And I supported them for about 2.5 years. And then I got the idea of doing merchandise. And sorry, am I being too long-winded?
That's all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have 1.5 hours, So what happened was I started doing merchandise, and then I put it in a number of shops, and nothing was really selling. Because suppose I put it in the Taj shop, and the Taj would put something in one corner, something there. So nobody would see it together. And then at some point, I was really at my wit's end how to support this family. There was a back room in a shop in Fontaniers, which was owned by a company called Mario, that's Francisco Martin and Count. And there was a room at the back which nothing ever sold. So they said, "You take this room." So I put my stuff in the room all together, and it started selling. And then I said, "Okay, this is the answer." And like an architect or as a planner, I decided to put 5 shops all over Goa. Like God, one in the south, one in the north, one in Panjim, one in Margao. And I put these, because I had to support the family, that was my responsibility. And it worked. And if Mario was rich, nothing of this sort would have happened, of this Mario gallery or anything. I would have just stopped at that point. And that would have been the end.
Thank you so much. Well, this matter of loving artists while they're still alive by supporting their work is no small matter. And as anyone trying to make a living from the arts knows, the role of somebody that accords you your place in the schema is not to be sneezed at all. Now, one of the things that you accomplished during your creation of course, there is the merchandise, but you did something that we really do not do enough of in India, which is to pay attention to the historicity of our own artists and do it in time and do it ourselves, without waiting for somebody to validate us from the outside. So one of the most spectacular sets of books to have emerged, I mean, from your store, I thought was actually a compilation of Mario's journals, the diaries which are from 1949 to 1952, if I'm not mistaken. And what would be of interest now to even people like Deepthi and Sanket is that these are journals kept by a self-taught artist. There was no art school education over there. One day at JJ College of Art, before he realized it would kill his soul if he continued, I'm sure. So these journals actually are extraordinary because you can see in these a Mario that does not even necessarily look like the Mario that we recognize. In these journals, you see evolution. In fact, a person testing 100 times over what he needed to be visually to create a visual temperament. There are inflections of Norman Rockwell, there are inflections of American comics. There's all sorts of things over here in these journals which are really evocative. And Vivek, I wanted to ask you that as somebody that is quite an avid consumer of, I mean, you've been to museums all over the world. You know the role of merchandise, like in France, the sort of things that they've done with a Sempe, who's partout, who's everywhere with that stuff. What has been your own equation with seeing Mario everywhere after perhaps not seeing enough of him in public view in the latter years? Yeah.
Thank you for thanks for that question. It's interesting. So first of all, I think I was born in 1968 and grew up in Bombay. One of the interesting things is that Mario was ubiquitous in my own childhood. That is when I was in the 70s, to a level that when part of this thing about visual storytelling, part of the thing about visual storytelling, this it whistles. Maybe you have to turn that off. Part of the problem with there's some of the framing I'd like to rethink about. First of all, it says visual storytelling in Goa. I think Mario's work has a strong Goa element and has had a huge impact on Goa. But that kind of mistakes his real impact particularly in the 60s and 70s, where he was very much an artist of Indian national aspirations. He painted this cosmopolitan Bombay society around him, but not limited to Bombay. He painted this society where all of India came together. These illustrated weekly works, thank you for finding them. These are hugely impactful modern works. When you think about being modern in this self-consciously modern way that Indians were, that I was born into that culture a little bit in Bombay, in Colaba with Mario living nearby. These works were ubiquitous. Then I literally learned how to read. The Bal Bharati work, things that she's talking about, they weren't in Goa. This was in Bombay. The first page that I learned how to read, this is Nitin. Nitin, he is 6, he lives in Nasik, with delightful illustrations, right? Which really drew you into wanting to read. I literally learned to read with Mario. Then this was the era of, a new kind of advertising coming out in India, which included Amul and all these iconic figures. Mario was ubiquitous there as well. He did Goa work. We had this book called From Goa with Love. I think it came out in the 70s. So that was impactful. But so first of all, we're talking about visual storytelling of an aspirational modern India. So it's much bigger than just Goa. Okay, that's one part of it. The other part of it is, I think, treating him as a cartoonist. I think that is to completely
Mario,
misunderstand.
I'm going to be coming to that section a little later. It's a large debate.
So I think these two things, when you now look at what Mario is in 2025, I think you have to assess it in 3 or 4 different categories. And one of those categories, I mean, this is entirely the creation of Gerard, and no other artists in India, and very few artists in the world are like this, is this remarkable merchandising element. I mean, last year I took a slow trip around the world, literally, to go in households all over the world, from West Coast of America, East Coast of America, Europe, England, Africa, and wherever I went, they had Gerard's products of Mario there. So Mario has become something else, and a huge variety of products. So I think that aspect of it, I think you have to say, like, Mario himself might not have anticipated, but then there are other elements to Mario's legacy which I think are yet to be caught up to. Sorry, that was a roundabout.
No, that's great. One thing I wanted to bring to attention is a particular PhD doctoral thesis that has been done recently by a person called Prakruti Ramesh on Mario's work. And she actually talks about this business of Mario being approved of and co-opted and what it is that makes him this popular right now. And one of the things that Prakruti points out, and I actually resonate with that also, is that his work actually speaks of a Goa that we are hoping for when we come here. So tourists that has come from Meerut or from wherever, like from Ahmedabad or from wherever else, when they come to the Goa airport, they are actually hoping to enter the cosplay of a Mario Goa. And according to Prakruti, the fact is that it is even more of an interesting dance because that Goa, when Mario is documenting it, Lautoli or other places, that was a Goa that existed around him. Whereas we are entering cosplay of a Goa that does not exist in that form and fashion, but we hope for. Deepti, as somebody who works with visuals in a very rich way, did you have an idea of Mario, or did you grow up with any kind of inflections of his work or tradition around you?
Yes, because I think I've visited Goa a lot, but even beyond just seeing his work in Goa, um, from 13 onwards, I lived in Ahmedabad, for example, and one of the cafes I would go there had, like a rip-off of the way Mario does things. So the walls were painted depicting scenes from Ahmedabad, but in a way that Mario would have done, like not as well as, obviously. I remember going to Mumbai in my college and going to Cafe Mondegar, and I think even when, I don't know if I registered whose work it was, but when I was aspiring to go to design college, you kind of start creating scenes of the world you see around you in the style of Mario. So I remember when I was putting my portfolio together for design college, I had created a scene of like, oh, this is the area around my school, in something which was again, ripping off his work. So to hear you say that, oh, you did the same, I think it's how we kind of form our own vocabulary as artists, by trying to see the world the way someone like Mario saw the world around him.
Fantastic. Do you have any experiences to share about what Mario meant for you in your earlier years when you were in college? You were right here in Goa College of Art,
yes,
like
yes.
me.
I want to especially mention this book actually. This book has been a great influence in my caricature career actually. I was literally carrying this book like a baby since I was in college. I want to share something with my association with Mario. Actually, my introduction to Mario happened. It's a very interesting story. My father mentioned about Mario first time to me. I think we were traveling to Panjim, and out of nowhere, out of a random conversation, he brings out Mario, and he said that Mario used to sit here, and he did a full life-size sketch drawing of Panjim city. So I was in, I think, 7th or 8th standard that time, and I had heard his name, but I was not aware of his work. So I was fascinated, and then he took me to the Panjim market, and he showed me the life-size mural. So I was so fascinated and I was so intrigued. So, and at that time, I never had internet connection. So in our local library in our village, there were 2 books of Mario. One, Goa with Love, and I think one of his sketchbooks. So I borrowed that, and I was literally copying his work. like every artist do. So that was my first association with Mario. And his sense of even the way he drew his characters, the character, especially the Goan characters, he made them alive. And I think the sense of exaggeration in my caricatures, I think it came from there. He was literally my first art school before I joined the art college.
What is actually very, very interesting, and this is something that I saw in various quotes of Mario's that I met, that he was very quick to tell people, first off, I'm not a political cartoonist. And then the next step was, I'm not even a cartoonist, I'm someone that likes to draw. And I think this sort of desire to evade labels is something that I know for a fact that Amrita, are you a comic artist? Not at all. Are you a graphic novelist? Somewhat. I'm a writer who paints. Like these things of being elusive and evasive around labels, I can see that with somebody like Deepthi as well, who is an animator, who is a comic artist, who does visuals of different sorts. So this desire to not be co-opted by a label of a cartoonist is a very interesting one, and it's worth unpacking what that really means. The images that I've pulled up right now over there is actually Mario at his prime peak. The recognizable style. You have on the one side Miss Fonseca, and on the other side, if I'm not mistaken, is that Rajini Nimbupani? Yeah. And there is a very memorably Mario quality, the polka dots, the confident lines, the way people are grossly exaggerated but never in an unkind way. So you have buxom women and you have nicely derriered women and uncles with paunches, but it's never done in a way that's malicious. And that's something that's quite remarkable. There's a sexy angle, there's a dancing, playful quality. And I think one of the reasons why Mario spoke so closely to us in India is because there is a burlesqueness and a chaos about our day-to-day life that he captured in a way that no minimalism can. Are there any thoughts, if anyone would like to share? For you, Gerard, are there certain things that resonate most with people vis-a-vis what they purchase or what they gravitate towards in the Mario Gallery?
Yeah, different people like different things, but my clientele is there are many clienteles. I guess one is a tourist who comes who wants to take back for his friends small little things. Then there are Goans who are coming back to Goa and want to take something back to Canada or Thailand or wherever. So they buy a different kind of thing. Then you have the slightly intellectual ones who want to buy the books because I've done 10 books on Mario. So there are different people buying different things, and I also have all the pictures of Mario. I have, you can buy the, the pictures, all limited editions. So there's something for everybody.
I wanted to say this in response to what you were saying about Mario. I was in the last, say, decade of his life. I spent a fair amount of time talking to him, at least on occasion, and very often with the idea that he was a great artist. Is that he was kind of what's the word? He was self-deprecating quite often. Mario was very self-deprecating as an individual, but one of the things that he resisted, didn't like, and I think is unquenched, is that one of the other elements of what Mario's legacy is. So there's the commercial angle, artist for the people, which has been done to an extraordinary level that no other Indian artist has. But there's also the critical and the cultural kind of place that Mario occupies. And he was always uncomfortably, I think, he was always uncomfortably shoehorned, pigeonholed. And I think that what he actually, particularly the works show at the very beginning, those incredible diaries that Amrita was saying, and also a series of different works he did throughout, which I think have to be seen in the context of some of the finest modern art, modern and contemporary art out of India. So that bit of it has not yet been done, and that bit of it was unresolved in Mario's own life. So I think I experienced at least 2 periods of time where he wanted to cross over into the gallery world, and both those times he was not able to do so successfully. So I think that is something that's unresolved.
There's a particular line that I pulled from an interview about how that very popularity was kind of an undoing for Mario in the opinion of people. Perhaps is it from your own interview, this particular line? Or?
Could be. I mean, he did say these kinds of things to me at various, but not exactly in these words.
Okay.
He wouldn't even have used popularity, perhaps, But his thing was, I do think that the fact that everyone relates to Mario, you show Mario to anyone in the world and of any age group, and they like it. And one of the things is absence of malice. The other thing is the great facility. He was a master of that line, right? Even at that period, I remember that event we're talking about, the last public event, there were kids who assaulted him. He already had Parkinson's and he managed to delight them with a few lines. So he was a genius, right?
Well, the reality is when I was about 14 years old, my parents actually drove me to the home in Lotoli. Actually, I was 14, maybe not yet joined art college, and we knew nothing from nothing and knew no one and had the audacity to ring the doorbell, and that man gently, sweetly greeted as if he had been waiting all along. So there's a certain generosity of spirit, and just we actually were led into the house. I saw his work, and I have those memories too of a person that allowed that access.
So I do think that when it comes to Indian art, we're in the 100th year of Mario. Sometimes recognition, particular kinds of recognition come late. But I would like to see, a whole part of the National Gallery, either in Bombay or in Delhi, focused on Mario, because he represents really the best of Indian art and aesthetics from a particular period of time.
One thing I wanted to specially actually speak to Sanket about, I have pulled up an image which came up after conversations with Vivek, is now I grew up with a Kendriya Vidyalaya Central School background, so this was not part of my educational backdrop. But there is a whole generation of people that grew up with Maharashtra Board textbooks, which had got Bal Bharati textbook with Mario illustrations. So I have Marathi-speaking cousins who grew up with Mario illustrations in their textbooks, and they had actually, some of them didn't even know who had done them. But they were just these highly harmonious pieces of work. And I find that in cultures, like whether they are Bengalis or the French, people that have grown up with that quality of caliber of art in their school textbooks, it does a certain something to their awareness and aesthetics. Sanket, I know that you are yourself working on illustrations that are going into textbooks for the Goa State Board. Is that correct? Could you tell me what it's been like for you and what are the aesthetic parameters that you're holding in mind while doing this?
I just wanted to mention one thing about, you just mentioned about Mario being asked to tone down his drawings, and I was watching one of his interviews with Mr. Karan Thapar yesterday, and he said, if I want to define my humor, I would say I'm not laughing at the person, I'm laughing with them. So that kind of stayed with me, kind of, and I think in regards to the textbook, it's always about how the coordinators who like to, they always try to tell me that you have to tone down a little bit,
What specifically are they asking you to
in
tone
terms
down?
of exaggeration, I would say. In
You're
terms
talking
of
about
my
caricatural.
style. Yeah, caricatural style. So it's very hard to explain to them the language of the caricature or of the language of the sketching, I would say, stylized sketching. So
What about the content of what you're drawing itself? Is there a lot of input that comes in, or is it not so much there?
yeah, they like to poke their nose into everything, like in terms of content also, and in terms of what I'm trying to sketch, what I'm trying to put on the paper also.
Do either Gerard or Vivek have any kind of context for the Bal Bharti work? Like the circumstances under which it happened, whether he had carte blanche to do what he wanted to? Does anyone know? Would you happen to know?
He did. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, he did a whole series. If you were for years, you were on the English text. He did all the illustrations for about from the age of 7 to the age of 15. You went through it, and I have a lot of people who come here and ask me for those pictures, and they take. I have a large archive, so I take printouts and give it to them. He did all of them, all the years, and everybody grew up on Mario.
To my panelists, we seem to be competing against a live football match. So you may just want to adjust your mics in consideration with this small detail. I wanted to talk about a particular aspect which is very special to me personally. Is that Mario and places are kind of inextricable. He had really a feeling for bringing alive a place, which is why people really tend to want to grab onto him as a Goan artist or an artist of Goa just because he had such a finger on the pulse. But in fact, he had a finger on the pulse of Dhobi Talav, he had a finger on the pulse of La Pigalle, he had a finger on the pulse of pretty much every place that he went to. There was a very vibrant connection with space and Mario. And what I found very moving was that through his life, it seemed, I mean, he's autodidact, but there was a fantasy of studying in Paris, which kept returning like a motif in his life. There was that fantasy that was there once the death of the father got in the way, once Goa liberation got in the way, once something else, some actual job that was willing to pay him got in the way. So, but this fantasy of elsewhere, going to some other place in order to become more than yourself was definitely very there. And I wonder whether both the artists over here, if there's something you'd like to say about, I know that Dipti recently came back from Berlin, was it? No, Germany in general. What is it that the other, in terms of a physical space, does to your work? And do you have a sense of what causes that yearning in somebody that was already so accomplished and in your own work?
So when I was in college, I think another Goan artist, Prashant Miranda, came to our college and showed us his sketchbooks. And I think that changed the way I started seeing the world. And every time I would travel or just go anywhere, I would have a sketchbook on me. So I don't know if it was about, it was just a way of seeing. I think when I draw, when I'm anywhere, I see that place better than I would, just by seeing it. And it's also a way of, I guess, like sense making about like what I'm feeling in that particular place. So this summer I was really lucky to be able to go to Germany for work. I visited Stuttgart, Dusseldorf, Köln, and I think it was a window into a life I hadn't considered for myself. And I could see when I was reflecting on my drawings when I came back, the things which were in my sketchbooks were the things which stood out to me, like people by the river in the evenings or whatever. I also think that, like in my own work, I'm drawing where I am. So because a lot of my work is autobiographical, I think place features as a way of like contextualizing where.
Do you become a different version of yourself in another place? That is the kind of thing I wonder.
I mean, when I'm traveling, you're kind of play acting a fantasy of a person, right? Like you're in a bubble which is removed from reality to begin with. So I feel like I enter the artist persona a lot more when I'm traveling than in my day-to-day life.
That's actually a fantastic line. I'll come to you, Sanket. I just something that matches up with that. I find that there is something about Mario that is extraordinarily tender and evocative in his carnet de voyage, in his travel notebooks. In fact, almost like a Uber Mario, if it were, there's something extra. And I almost feel like he sinks into the sensuality. Like there's also a lot more, for somebody that keeps it clean, like there's of course the lascivious uncles and the busty aunties in the cartoons, but largely there is a certain sensuality in the European art which is not there in the Indian work in quite the same way. And one detail which I found fascinating is that later in life, by which time Mario was already Mario, he did get to go to the precious Europe and stay with his brother first, and then with his sister, who happens to be in the audience here. Fatima is right here with us. And by then, he realized that, in fact, Europe didn't have anything to teach him. He didn't need to go to the art schools anymore. So that was quite amazing. Sanket, is there something about travel and work that...
Yeah, I was very much fascinated by his later work when he traveled to Europe. Actually, when I was starting out, I had a lot of apprehensions about using colors. I was just working with inks and, very traditionally how old cartoonists used to sketch. So while looking at this work, I think there is one style of Mario. It's like Art Nouveau, where he uses flat colors. So I started using flat colors. That was my start to like getting used to colors. So And I see a lot of impression. I see a lot of influence of impressionist painters. I see some influence of Ronald Searle, Al Hirschfeld. I see some Van Gogh. So this later work, this I'm very much fascinated by this work.
Sanket, were you aware of his journals for a long time? Were you aware of how many times his own style shifted en route? Is that something that?
Yeah, I was aware, and I was very fascinated by how much range of an work he has created. It's very I feel it's an insulting to just categorize him as a cartoonist. I see him as a very good watercolor artist. I see his work with cross hatching. It's incredible, you know. Yeah.
Pulled up behind you, in fact, Sanket, it's probably a good time to enter this,
Yeah.
is specifically caricature. Mario did not seem to do a lot of it. I think there was something about it that didn't sit well with his temperament. And one repeated critique from a lot of his editorial colleagues was that they just didn't find that he had enough anger in him, that he didn't have an axe to grind with anyone, that there was no the fire and the fight was not there in the work, which was leveled as a form of critique. And actually, you can see that when you see caricatures done by Mario, they are very skillful, but they're also almost portrait-like in how harmonious they are. They're not trying to actually.
They're very
take it-
subtle, actually.
Yeah, and whereas you have a very different way of going about it. You have a kind of a style that's also harmonious, also probably not axing people.
Yeah.
What is it like?
I feel like I don't want to go harsh with the exaggeration, like how caricature artists from the Europe does. You know, it's because as a community we are very insecure, and I've been doing a lot of live shows. You know, I've been traveling a lot for the past 2 years, and I'm doing live shows where I tend to notice that people are little bit insecure, especially the men. They have been a little bit insecure about their look. So I tend to tone it down a little bit. Don't go not to go harsh with the lines and exaggeration. I'm very much inspired by Mario, actually.
Vivek, is there anything that you'd like to add to this? Yeah.
Thank you. I like the word harmonious you're using to describe Mario's oeuvre, because I think that's true, and this wonderful absence of malice. But one of the things that I want to talk about in the context of these travel images,
Yes.
and I think they are important, and they're an important part of why Mario has to be truly assessed and reassessed as one of the foremost artists of India. One of the things that comes into his gaze when he's traveling is, I think he's carrying the consciousness of being an artist from India, and particularly an India that is emerging from colonialism. So there's a certain self-confident approach. You are struck by the Paris images, but he produces really telling, brilliant images of many places.
Yes, it's true.
New York, where I lived for many years, he distills New York into a couple of images. Some of his best images, I'm lucky to own one of them, are of Jerusalem. I mean, he does a Jerusalem cocktail party, which I have, which is just unbelievable, filled with characters who are both Israelis as well as Arabs as well as probably Indians, and he captures them all in this incredible kind. So he's a master of observation. This comes out from the diaries itself. So I think Mario's authorial voice as an artist is of this very quiet, connected observation. So he's a master of that. But the thing about the travel images and why they're important is I am very resistant to this idea of provincializing Mario. This is part of provincializing our identities, provincializing who we're supposed to be as Indians, who we're supposed to be as Goans. I mean, to be someone from Goa like Mario is to be part of the world. I was lucky earlier, I was sent by Hindustan Times to, thanks to Fatima, I was able to go quite close to where Mario was born 100 years ago in Daman, right?
Wow.
And you have to understand, like this, we are so obsessed with Goa. Mario has to be a Goan artist. But you can't understand Mario unless you go to Daman. And in Daman, the world that he grew up there, the Parsis were there already. Like his affinity to the Parsi community begins there. Unbelievably, Udwada, which is next to Daman, their traditional Parsi architecture has Indo-Portuguese elements. So this incredibly, and Africa is there, and the world is there in Daman also. So this incredibly cosmopolitan worldview is baked into Mario, and it is what he expresses. So that is why I feel like this idea of when he travels, all those layers come out, because he is also had this incredible kind of Boas Familias, Portuguese element, and then he has Goa, and then he has the pride in being Indian, and he's married into this family which is also very proud of being Indian, the Salim Ali kind of legacy, and
The
he
Haidaris.
represents this Bombay kind of tradition. So that's when you see the mastery, the masterful artist that he is there.
Actually, this is a good point to talk to the two artists on the panel about just the technical aspect of making art, the restlessness of making art, of trying to find one's many temperaments therein. And the Jerusalem drawing that he speaks of, if I'm not mistaken, it was a junket. It was some kind of an invitation to go somewhere. Sorry, I don't have those images here. But the importance of patrons who will send you somewhere with no strings attached or minimal strings attached is so important for you to actually be creating work, for you to actually have the luxury of that, the role of the patron. And in some sense, this is something many of us crave. What has it been like for the two of you to make a living? Sanket, we can start with you. I can see that in your CV, there are a billion things you do, clearly. So what is your formula for being a fiscally solvent, surviving artist in this kind of a world?
I think Mario has played a huge role in my initial days. When I was juggling between my studies, and I was apprehensive of joining the art college. And I think he was my only staple food in terms of the fundamentals, in terms of sketching, in terms of perspective, the way he composed things, he composed his characters, the whole composition. I think I was learning, even the book by Gerard sir. I think that helped me a lot, actually, in my initial days.
Do you mind the fact that despite, I mean, it's a big country, it's a big state, but there is such a paucity of artists that you can even lean on, that we are leaning so heavily on one Mario, that that FN Souza gets an immense push only with the extraordinary amount of efforts on people like Vivek's part. There is such a paucity of our own people to lean on vis-a-vis this. Gerard, I was just wondering, the task of creating an archive of an artist's oeuvre, especially while they're still alive, I see it as almost a sacred job. Do you see that as something that that you would think of doing for other artists?
No, I wouldn't do it for anybody else. I was doing a book on Mario, so I had to collect a lot of pictures.
Okay.
And suppose I heard there was a series of murals in Bombay, I'd go to Bombay and photograph them. But to prepare this book, I had to collect all these pictures. I wouldn't do it for any other artist. That's it.
Okay. Deepti, yeah.
Even I feel Mario was way ahead of his time in terms of. I think I was fascinated by how he made the balance of being a traditional artist and also incorporating some non-traditional things in his work. Like I feel his work is very like his work panel flow like a very graphic novelish kind of thing, and even his dense illustrations without making it hard on your eyes, and there are a lot of things happening simultaneously and without making it grotesque. And even
that you can see the evolution, because in the journals there are things that kind of tip over on the other
even
side.
in his travel book sketches, they are so atmospheric. Even the style, even the cross hatching, and then the flow of the watercolors and inks, whatever he used, they were so atmospheric. It was almost like transportive. You can almost transporting to that world. So I think even the characters in his if you noticed, if the characters in his illustrations, they were like, actually some of the characters were directly looking at you. It's like breaking the fourth wall in the films, so that's where he was way ahead, I think.
Deepti, would you like to say something about what it means to make a living as an artist, the role of the patron, the role of what has it been like for you personally?
I haven't had patrons. I think I kind of separate me as an artist and me as a designer,
Mm.
because I make my money by being a designer, animator, visual storyteller. Me as an artist is not making any money at all. Sometimes the rare client will come where they give you a little creative freedom, which is what the project I was referring to, the one which gave me the opportunity to go to Germany, was. Um, I I sold my own work for the first time this year, and I think just the fact that someone would pay money to read your thoughts was so mind blowing. I don't know how you feel about it. Um, I think I'm still figuring that bit out, but yeah, the money making happens with design.
You know, but there is a different relationship that your generation and younger have with this idea of crossing over between creating art and creating merch. Like a lot of the Instagram artists actually do not see a big step down in doing that, or it's not seen as some kind of a watering down or selling out to be doing that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Again, we'll mention another peer and a very dear Goan artist who we also worked with, Pearl D'Souza, who has a really beautiful shop where she makes stunning calendars, stickers, zines, and I think the beautiful thing about merch is it can make art really accessible to you. So you have stickers on your water bottles. Sorry. You have stickers on your laptops. You also have the opportunity to, own prints, and then there are original pieces of art that not all of
So
us have.
you don't see any separators necessarily between these things existing. That's
No, I think, but I do see that there's a in our I think people buy art in very different ways. I think going back to what you were saying about Mario wanting to break into the gallery space and struggling to, I find myself really struggling to also label myself as an artist sometimes, because I've realized words on their own art, images on their own art. The minute you enter the world place where comics exist, it doesn't earn a place into high art very easily.
yes.
And if you're selling prints, for example, prints, unless you're someone as iconic as Mario, um, people will buy prints of artwork which feel kind of like decorative almost.
Matches the
And
couch.
yes, and comics don't always fit into that because they're telling a story, and somewhere pieces of art which are very storytelling focused might not be the things that people want to buy.
Yeah.
So I do see that the peers of mine who are creating art to sell, there is a certain quality of them which makes them palatable, which makes them, hey, this is something I want to put on my laptop if it's a sticker, or this is something I want in my bedroom wall if it's a print or an original piece of art. So I'm still like navigating those spaces of, but at the same time I don't see it as lesser art. So
That's actually very interesting, the way you're straddling this kind of space much more comfortably. I wanted to actually bring up something that came up a little while ago when you mentioned Prashant Miranda. Now, I don't think Prashant Miranda is he a Goan artist at all? I think technically Mangalorean. So these technicalities mean a lot to me because as Vivek has dealt with for the last decade, I have the wrong last name. So I'm a Patil who has been here for like 40 plus years. So that never makes me a Goan artist somehow, no matter what happens. Whereas the Mirandas and the Jerry Pintos are Goan artists and Goan writers, like carte blanche, no problem at all, right? So Deepthi is important for me on this panel because she's somebody that has chosen to make Goa her home, their home, and there is work happening here. But despite this hard-nosed and fabulous ability to straddle the commercial and the artistic, Deepthi has a very strong moral bone and connection with Goa. So I'm going to show you. She's done work with Mole. There is work that has happened with various things, drawing attention to ecology. This is a story that was a short comic done on scuba diving in Goa. This is a comic done about poi and the bread traditions of Goa. This was done with a writer called Sachi D'Souza. So the work has had a very, very strong Goa connection. And a very, very strong curiosity to go deep in Goa and within things over here. So this may be a good time to segue into a theme that Vivek has also been very invested in, which is about the different ways of belonging. Is Mario a Bombay artist, Goa artist? Does it matter? Is Dipti a Goa artist? Is Amrita a Goan artist? Is it an artist living in Goa? What are these terms? What is this way of belonging, and what are these ways of belonging?
Thank you, Amrita. Actually, I'm lucky to own an artwork of yours called Ways of Belonging, which is an idea from Eunice D'Souza, who had, and I think it's been useful for some time. I think I've come around to the point of view that rather than, they are Goa artworks, and these Goa artworks don't have to be made by someone who is ethnically Goan. And they're clearly works which speak to the moment. And a number of the Mole campaign is like that. There are artworks right now on display in the Crafts Pavilion, done by Christine Michael, which are artists who live here in Goa and who've responded to the conditions here. And I see these as legitimate Goa artworks. And it doesn't matter who you are. But I have a lot of sympathy for your previous point, which you asked the artist. I want to speak about that. Asad gave us a long time to speak, so I'm going to go back to that, which is that what you're talking about, this straddling different genres, being forced to hustle in the way that you are, it reflects actually a collapse of systems. You know, Mario in a way also didn't have built-in systems, but it's important to remember that when Mario got a journalistic job in Mumbai in the 50s, I think he started in the 50s. It was enough to pay him to live in Mumbai. And if your work was, I actually at the end of my at the end of kind of this period, which happened towards the end of the last century and into the beginning of this century, if you wrote for a Mumbai paper in Mumbai, everyone saw your work. Didn't matter whether it was in Mumbai, Midday or on Times of India or on Economic Times, another paper. Everyone saw your work. Papers were being sold on the pavement. A good, well-heeled person living in Colaba or wherever would get 3 newspapers. So your work was very widely read. There was a context. Mario's work was seen all the time. And
also, Mario at that point came from privilege. Things may have changed later, but it was definitely.
Mario remarkably, we can get some clarifications on this, but Mario remarkably was able to pay for his family to live in Bombay,
Yes,
based on drawings that he made, and he was doing this late into his life, by the way, doing drawings and faxing them off, and that paid. You can't imagine Saket doing drawings right now and being able to live a middle class life.
Absolutely.
Where it's out of the question. But also the thing is, currently in India, this is part of why Mario is not properly assessed. This is why we're not, we don't have a Mario wing in the NGMA, or we don't have some solid state recognition of him here, is because the ecosystem has collapsed into a functioning art ecosystem. We didn't have it necessarily professionally, but it lasted in India for a long time. What you're seeing here is a giant festival, but in the context of Mario, you need a critical assessment. You need a cultural, a buy-in. One interesting thing about Mario, the moment he started doing these visual diaries, Fatima told me, at the end of the year, they would go to the bishop. They would go to the vice,
for their personal amusement.
They would read this. So this graphic novel, isn't that right, Fatima? This graphic novel was circulated by the right-thinking people in Panjim, and they would all look at this artwork. So imagine the cultural impact. If you're producing an annual diary and it's looked at. And the moment he went to Bombay, he's being printed in a magazine, in newspapers and magazines where everyone is reading them. So that is very difficult to achieve today. And part of this collapse pays off. I mean, one of the side effects is also a cost to Mario's kind of curatorial and artistic appreciation. And it is a real shame, because Mario is one of the giants of the 20th century, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, there are multiple ways to look at it. Like, I think part of me, as somebody who is polyphonic I'm a writer who paints, who also does graphic novels. There's something in me that resents the fact that I will be taken seriously only when Serendipity puts me in one of their shows. Like, why does my caliber and heft depend on art gallery setting approval? So there is a lot of these conversations. But also there is a thing of finding one's people, which I think Dipti's generation and younger do very well, because they seem to be following one another regardless of whether they're sitting in Amsterdam or Kathmandu. But whether that translates into money or being able to live is a different matter altogether. Actually, we are at 1 o'clock mark. Are there things that any of you would like to share which are particular to your experience as artists creating work here or in? Actually, Vivek, there's one thing I want to. Yes, please go ahead. Interesting. Did you all hear the question? He's asking about whether it's replicable for artists easily and what that experience has been like. Because honestly, it's probably a lot of effort on your part too, Gerard. I recognize that.
I don't know really. you know, whether see, Mario is a great artist. And there's so many aspects to Mario. You know, he's a cartoonist. He has so many different styles.
Could you hold the mic in a way that it's not
Okay, can you hear me better
much
now?
better? Thank you.
Okay, so he worked in so many different styles. Mario was this genius who was like five artists in one artist. So he could work with pen and ink. He could work in color. He could work in scratchy stuff. I mean, there's some pictures of Mario you wouldn't think were done by Mario. So he was so versatile, and it's for me that was fodder for. See, I'm a designer, so I had to find some way to support this whole family. So I could, you know, take, like, say, I know people love dogs. So I say, I take out all the dogs from different paintings and put them on pottery, on ceramic, and they sell because there's so many dog lovers. So I've been doing all this kind of funny thing to now are the other, like say somebody like say Sousa. What would I do with Sousa? I don't see, I mean, they're just too highbrow. I couldn't see, anything happening. Now I made a calendar of a centenary calendar. So there's so much fodder in Mario's work, which give me the opportunity to support the family or to make up this business. I don't know how, if it could be done with other artists, but I'm not going to try.
Well, I mean, there's actually some very stunningly beautiful things that have been done with artwork that you see in museum collections, including in our very own MAP, Museum of Art and Photography, Bangalore. I found that they have created stuff that actually beautifully did justice to the work of contemporary people in a way that is, I mean, part of us actually, as a practitioner, feels sad that the merch needs to happen or something needs to happen, but the juggling of this is the way of the world, isn't it? Vivek, what do you feel about, like, one of the things that has been noteworthy about you as a person across the board has been, much as you acknowledge the old masters, you have an ability for sensing out talent in those that are young and not already inducted into coteries of acceptability and coolth. So what is it like for you to, in fact, recognize a young artist, to like create a sense of acknowledgement and not wait till they are almost dead before you give them their due, or sometimes after, as in the case of most artists?
Thank you for asking that question. I think, actually it is that we are very, very lucky. All of us on the stage, all of us here are very lucky. You also, Amrita, are lucky because we belong to a profound living tradition. We belong to a cultural strand that is very much living, right? And I recognized this the first time I met you, and Mario recognized it the first time I met him as an adult. And so I was never, the first time I met Mario as an adult, I had spent a year having my mind blown. I knew Mario as a child, but I came back at age maybe 24 from New York. I had come back from having my mind blown by a year hanging out with Sousa in America. And Sousa had also, by the way, I just called him out of the phone book, and he immediately welcomed me over, and we started having intense conversations about who we were in the world and art. This immediately happened with Mario as well. So it's not as though when you recognize someone else who's in that same strand, when it comes to Indian art in general, it was this whole thing, serendipity, and things like serendipity. This is a very new phenomenon. The Indian art world was done by practitioners who contemporary and modern Indian art world was done by practitioners who generally didn't have money and acclaim in their lifetimes, right? Sousa was impoverished right up to the end. They had a certain amount of cachet. Ram, of course, is a witness. Ram Rahman, we're very lucky to have him here, is witness to the Indian artistic cultural heritage for the full 70 years of his life. And he will attest to this. Some people he of course comes from a part where which was enshrined. It was the state recognized a bunch of people. It's not like people made money. It's not like they were selling the someone like Hussein, for instance, had a certain amount of celebrity and a certain amount of money, but he was still barefoot, kind of, not only as an affectation. He was a man of the people.
Well, it's taken now for Qatar to finally open a museum dedicated to him.
Yeah, Hussein's an example, Sousa's an example, Gaitonde is an example. These are people who died in the 21st century, right? I was already an adult, well into heading into my 30s, and there was no money in this. So this whole world that we're seeing now, this is kind of, I describe it unkindly as an instant art world. They just added water, and all these PhDs and art experts popped out of nowhere who were never around when Sousa was alive, for instance, right? Routinely, people now bloviate about Sousa and what Sousa is, and so on and so forth. It's very valuable, I find, to return to people who knew Sousa when he was alive. This is why it's so great that we're doing this with Mario, and it happened with Mario quite early. In a sense, all of us have living memories of Mario. This room has got a number of people with living memories
Actually,
of Mario.
this has been a spectacularly rich audience on
Yeah,
that
so
count.
this is very, very significant. So I think that when it comes to extending the family tree, we're lucky. I mean,
Do you think, actually connecting with that, do you think that it was an asset for Mario to actually have belonged to many places and no place for him?
I think that's one of the great things about Mario, is he is an entry. And let's not forget it, Mario himself never provincialized his identity.
He did not.
You could have come from anywhere in the world. Famously, people showed up from all over the world.
Allen Ginsberg, he took him to Dhobi Talav to.
Yeah, people showed up from all over the world and then went and spent time in hanging out in Lothalni.
Yeah.
Everyone tells me, for a certain period, everywhere I went in the world, whether it's Mexico or, do you know Mario? Mario's my good friend, right? It was like one of those things that Mario's my good friend. I heard wherever I went. So Mario was he had all these things, a cultural ambassador. I think his great gift to us was that he was forced to, and I'd like to hear Fatima actually on this. He was forced to, but he came back to Goa. It was never easy. Those
Yes.
years were difficult in many different ways, but his physical presence, I really felt when he passed away. I wrote this in my obituary. I felt like I was with a banyan tree. I was in a banyan tree, and that banyan tree still exists. The remarkable thing we live in that banyan tree still.
Yes, but what is more actually makes him more endearing to me was that, if I'm not mistaken, Mario's father, was it Custodio? He was responsible for the arrest of Kustoba Rane. Yeah, so, and basically this act, which Kustoba Rane would be like a freedom fighter to people here, whereas he was probably like a bandit to the Portuguese powers that be. And the role of his arrest being involved, the family being involved with the arrest, caused in Mario some amount of anxiety about how he would be received back in a post-liberalization, basically post-1961 Goa. So to me, that is very interesting that he was actually fairly candid about these things. And even the Goa was not a return that was like a one-way ticket. It was like a slow deliberation. There was the Indian army camped in the Lotoli house at one point, I think. What was it like for him to return to Goa, Fatima, for Mario? If you could tell us a little bit. Doesn't. Okay, all right. Yes, please. Hi, Ran.
Hi. No, it's fascinating conversation. I'd met Mario in the early 1980s, I think, through Sham Benegal, Charles Correa, that incredible cosmopolitan creative community in Bombay. But I want to first record Gerard's incredible role in bringing, Mario out into a much broader public later in life, but specifically the diaries.
Yes.
Which a number of years ago, when I was last in Goa, 1 or 2 trips ago, I discovered those diaries that Gerard had put together. And I was absolutely blown away by those diaries. And I regard those diaries as equal to any literature which has come out of India uh, of that period or later. And I think they really have to be recognized as such. You know, you have, I mean, I'm talking about the English language. You have writers like Salman Rushdie, etc. But of course, in regional languages, we've had, you know, incredible writers across India. But I think what Mario did with the writing, his observation, and the drawings in those diaries. You know, I'm a documentary photographer, so I was really looking at how he was looking, but through drawing. And they're absolutely phenomenal. And they really need, I mean, you've got all these Jaipur literary festivals, etc. now. I mean, those books need to be, you know, put out in a situation like that, which is literary.
Yes. But Ram, that's actually a fantastic observation. I actually feel that polyphony is almost punished. It's not taken seriously. Like if you do several things well, it's almost a setback. You do one thing properly and keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper as opposed to do multiple things. So you're right. And even the fact that he chose not to go to art school but did a BA honors in literature, from what I have read. Asad, yes.
About Mario's collaborations and friendships, especially with Busy Bee. Like I grew up, you know, with the afternoon going through it, and we did one kind of attempted to do one talk on that at Avid.
Actually, would one of you be better located? Like, I do have the talking points on this, but there may be people with more lived knowledge about some of these things. And after that, I do want to come back to our artists because it's all very well, but I would like to also know what it's like for Goa to continue to be a place of work.
Yeah, I want to talk about the diaries which you brought up. It's strange. Mario was asked to do the diary by his mother at a very early age, maybe 8 years old. And every day he was forced to do a picture. And it was first in just exercise books, so there were lines across. And he wasn't a good artist. It took him time. By the time it was 1949, when he was maybe 21 years old, 22, where he started really becoming a great artist. And it's 49, 50, 51, where he really became a master. And then he got his first job, so he stopped the diaries. And it's a strange thing about it, the diaries nobody saw. He never showed them to anybody because he was making fun of people. Not fun in the sense, it was about an aunt of his who fell down, you know, while walking the dog or something like that. So he never showed the diaries to anybody. It was his secret. And everybody wanted to see these diaries, but he wouldn't show them. And there was the parish priest who used to draw regularly, who wanted to see the diaries, and Mario refused to show them. So he went and complained to the bishop, saying, this guy is not showing the diaries to me. So the bishop called Mario and his mother, and the bishop saw the diaries, and he said, wonderful, you just carry on drawing. Forget about the parish priest. You know?
Actually, the two artists here will be able to say something. It is not that unusual for there to be journals with all kinds of intriguing behind the scenes stuff which the world doesn't get to see. I think most artists have something like that going on, which has got behind the scenes thing. Asad's question about Busy Bee and other friendships, because these were deep friendships, and almost when people quit a job and opened a new establishment as an editor, Mario would travel with them. That happened a couple of times. What?
With Busy Bee particularly, and I do agree with Asad, it's one of the great kind of literary friendships that public friendships we have between Busy Bee and Mario. And whatever Busy Bee did, Mario, first of all, Busy Bee has also this incredible style. Busy Bee was a journalist. Who here doesn't know who Busy Bee is?
Don't assume.
Okay, so I am assuming almost no one knows who Busy Bee is. Busy Bee is a legendary Bombay journalist by the name of Behram Contractor. And he had this lifelong, journalistic career. As long as his journalistic career existed, he was paired with Mario. Even when he left and started the afternoon. I think it was the afternoon. Mario went with him as well. And so this delightful Busy Bee also had a totally unique, delightful style of writing what's around him with the total absence of malice. Right? So there were characters, there were these archetypes all the way through his writing, but totally absent of malice. I actually grew up, the reason I'm a journalist, I often say, is because I read Busy Bee every day. And I aspire to also write a daily column for the Goans in the same way, and hopefully one day I'll rise to that level. But so Busy Bee had this thing and Mario had this thing together, and because of Busy Bee partly, but also I've realized Mario's own long-standing affinity. Mario is also kind of like the in-house artist of the Parsi community. So if you go to any Irani restaurant in Bombay, I promise you, the way you know it's a really good Irani restaurant is if they have Mario drawings on the wall of the Parsi community. So like to tell the Parsis that Mario is a Goan artist is kind of a ridiculous thing,
Yeah.
So it is one of the most remarkable and lovely aspects of Mario's career, is this incredible friendship. I believe, by the way, Busy Bee's entire archive plus drawings by Mario is online.
I would like to, I know this room is full of people who adore Mario, but in fairness to what Mario stood larger for, which is of the act of relentless creation in many places, I was actually wanting to ask the two of you what the art making process is like for you all, whether there is a sense of community. I know that here the experiences may be very different for Sanket than from Deepti, because I think the way you all tap into community is very different. Where your friendships have led into vis-a-vis your work, the experience may be different. Is there anything you'd like to share? In terms of your working, whether there are studios where artists work together, what is it like? Because one striking thing that I used to find is that Goa College of Art, at that point of time, the degree of low self-esteem that we possessed was like off the charts. Like it's really something else. So like there would be something going on in an elite gallery and the art college students would not show up. Now that has started changing. Like some of the strongest work that I've seen Serendipity is done by the Goan artists over here. But it was not the case before. And I think I would really like to know what the actual physical working conditions are for, like what kind of conversations are there with peers, if any, for the two of you. One.
Like I said before, I feel like I struggle to. I don't know if my work finds acceptance in gallery spaces. And the people I work with are also not necessarily artists. So if I talk about the work I've done with the Mole campaign, for example, we're a group of 4, which is the core art team, and then we have lovely people like Zai and other people who care about what's going on, who come in with their own art. But we're working with scientists and lawyers who are doing groundwork, and what we are doing is, hey, we can make this accessible to the general public, because the truth is no one's going to go through
Is there a flow of artist conversations and artists working collaboratively in a space? Is there some of that going on in your Goa?
in very informal ways. They're like artist circles. Purvai, for example, did this thing once where one of my friends hosted a collaging evening where we just sat on the living room floor with a bunch of magazines and made bookmarks. I find these informal artist circles, or just like being able to show each other work, like with Swabu and Nishant, for example, there's a lot of, hey, I've done this, what do you think? They'll show me what they're working at. I've with Sachi, for example,
there seems to be a lot of online camaraderie for sure. For those of you who are unfamiliar with their work, look up Deepti's, is it Paus? Is your studio called Paus?
Yes.
So look up their work. I know Sanket is also on Instagram. Many of us are not the strongest spokespeople for our work, but that doesn't mean that we aren't roaring in other media. So please do look up their works. Sanket, what has it been like for you?
I've been a part of a couple of. We had created locally. We had created in our village. I come from a village called Marcel. It's known as the hub of artist and visual art, actually. And we had created a kind of a community as such, where we were promoting local talents, and especially in visual art. And even while I've been working with a lot of like-minded peoples for past 3 to 4 years, where we were contextualizing and a lot of contextualization of syllabus, and we are creating art materials for the primary section of students. So I see a lot of yeah, mine is a very lonely job actually. I like to isolate myself and work. And even while I've been traveling a lot and doing live shows where I get an opportunity to meet various caricature artists from various other states. So yeah, it's kind of shapes your art also, and you're likely to meet different people.
Okay. So we are almost nearing the end of our time. I was just thinking that one of the things that is worth talking about is the matter of belonging. One wants to belong enough that one can survive the world and keep making art and have a community to tap into now and then. But one doesn't want to belong so much that one is almost reduced in one's scope or sort of boxed and sort of categorized in ways that are premature and unnecessary. I think that the work of Mario to me has always been a kind of a lineage, a kind of sprawlingly expansive thing. And it's just been great to be able to speak about the work and to showcase some of it and to talk about how it has influenced people of many generations and many different kinds of personal practice. So thank you very much for being here, and I hope you have a beautiful festival over here. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you to our panelists for this wonderful. Excuse me. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for this wonderful conversation. We would like to extend our thanks to Asad Lalji, Janvi Pradhan, and Dhwani Vyas from Avid Learning for their extensive support and efforts in putting together this session and the one this afternoon, which explores coastal culinary dialogues. We hope you enjoy the many programs the festival has to offer over the next 8 days, and do join us in the evening at the arena at the Nagali Hills. Thank you.